Today's topic is the exciting process of plant reproduction in angiosperms. Before we jump into that, we want to tell you a little story that relates and always reminds us about how fascinating angiosperm reproduction really is. Now, we are sisters. We live in different areas of Texas with our own separate families. One day in the Pinky household, I happened to notice a few bees flying by our window. I happen to be pretty enthralled by most insects, so my family watched these bees for a while. It didn't take long to realize that these bees had made a nest, a beehive, so to speak, in the insulation material in our house. They had found a small opening through the windowsill. Some people may not enjoy this, we realize, but we were a little fascinated. It's not every day that you can observe a beehive so close. But over the weeks, we found a lot of friends suddenly started having some weird plans and things that came up that always seemed to keep them from being able to visit our house. One day, we had a little family barbecue, and we learned a very scientific lesson. Okay, not really. Bees do not like barbecue. Or maybe they don't like the smoke from the grill, we're not really sure. And maybe it was just that our particular bees had a distaste for barbecue. We have not done a controlled study on this. But on this day, it became apparent to us that the bees had to go. But we didn't want to call an exterminator. Why? Well, that's where we get into this amazing story of plant reproduction. We'll come back to the story in just a minute and how it ties into plant reproduction. Angiosperms are flowering plants, and they are some of the most successful and diverse plants around. When you think of flowering plants, you may not realize that a lot of plants actually produce flowers. Many grasses, for example, many crops, all plants that produce fruit. In fact, flowering plants all bear fruit, just maybe not the type of fruit you are thinking of. Not all fruits, if going by the biological definition, are sweet or even edible. By the biological definition, a fruit develops from the ovary of a plant, which doesn't exactly sound appetizing. Pumpkins, green beans, tomatoes, squash, these all developed from the ovary of a flowering plant. These are all fruits. The term vegetable really isn't used as a true biology definition. A lot of what grocery stores classify to be vegetables are other structures of plants, like leaves, think of lettuce, or stems, think of celery. And sometimes grocery stores just classify vegetables as plant structures that are generally not as sweet. So angiosperms have flowers, and these are the reproductive structures. Many flowers contain both male and female parts. Other flowers only contain one gender of parts. Let's talk about flower parts of an angiosperm. First, we'll start with the male parts. The male parts make up the stamen. Stamen has men in it, so that helps me remember male.
All right, so far you got the characteristics. What are the characteristics for angiosperms?
Stamen.
They have flowers, the reproductive structures of the flowers. They can fruit, right? They can make fruit. Are all fruits sweet?
No.
No. Is a vegetable a fruit?
No.
Yes, most vegetables are fruits actually. Anything that comes from an ovary of a plant is a fruit. The true vegetables would be like root vegetables, like carrots, potatoes, onions. Yeah, but like pumpkins, that would be a fruit. Okay, stuff like that. Huh? Yes. A lot of things with seeds.
Yeah, they have roots.
Because it has seeds. Because it comes from the bud of a plant. Okay. So they grow above ground. Rooted would be underground. So yeah, those are kind of neat. So number 2, a topic emphasizes because not all fruits are sweet or even edible. Every plant that forms a flower must have a fruit. How would you define a fruit?
Something that comes off of a budding.
All right, something that comes off of the bud of a plant. But I was going to say anything from a ripened ovary. Okay, that's kind of the generic definition. Any piece of produce from a ripened ovary, like a squash, zucchini, those are fruits. Tomatoes, those are fruits. They're actually, for the true biological definition, they're fruits. So the grocery stores, they don't know what they're talking about. Okay, how can fruits be helpful in seed dispersal? What do you guys think? In the wild, yeah.
They make more of their own self.
Okay, so the seeds are going to make more of them their own selves, right? But the seed dispersal, so spreading the seeds across wide distances, because can you imagine, if you had baby seeds and you wanted your babies to survive, they would probably fall off the plant and land about maybe a foot away from the plant. What happens if the baby seeds start growing right next to mama plant?
They'll grow into each other.
Right, they'll start to use each other's resources and somebody's going to kill somebody else, right? So we want the seeds to be dispersed long distances away. They're orphans at this point, they're going to be away from their parents. Why and how would that happen? Anybody here?
Animals moving in and out.
Right, animals can get it stuck to their fur and move it to a new location. Animals can also do what?
Poop it out.
Yeah, eat it and then poop it out in another location. That is why plants look ripe and tasty. They want animals to eat them. Because the plants know, hey, if this one gets eaten, the seed will survive. The seed is very hardy. and it will survive and get passed through the digestive system. Okay, so now we're hitting the, if you look on the, let's see, the statement, yes. Huh? The answer for seed dispersal, how can fruits be helpful in seed dispersal is fruits hold seeds and animals can eat the fruits to then move to new locations. So something along the lines we talked about also sticking to animal fur. Okay, the next part is the stamen part, which is the lower left-hand corner.
The stamen includes the filament and the anther. The filament is a stalk that supports the anther. The anther is a rather fluffy structure that produces pollen. Really, pollen is the sperm of the plant. Now, onto female parts, the pistil. The pistil is made of three major parts. The stigma, I like to say sticky stigma because pollen is supposed to stick onto this sticky structure. The style, which is the stalk that supports the stigma, and then the ovary at the base of the structure. The ovary is where fertilization will occur inside and seeds are formed within it. Also, remember the ovary will ripen into a fruit.
Okay, I'm going to pause. I can go back in a second. So for your part 3, flowers can contain both genders of flower or of flower parts. Label A, B, and C. What was A, guys?
Anther.
Anther, right. What was B?
Filament.
Filament. C?
Stamen.
Stamen, right. A, anther. B, filament. C, stamen. That's the whole shebang. It's kind of hard to see there, but C is the whole male part. Okay, then we've got the female part. What was G representing?
Stigma. Oh no.
G is the whole part.
Pistil.
Right, the pistil.
And E.
I didn't write that down. All right, so G, which is the whole female part, is the pistil. The sticky end, part D,
Stigma.
stigma, good. Part E,
Style.
style. That girl's got some style, right? That's how I remember that one. And then the part F, which is the lowest part,
Ovary.
ovary. Thumbs up if you're ready. Yes, questions?
G.
G was the pistil. P-I-S-T-I-L. Ashley? C for the guy was called the stamen. S-T-A-M-E-N. Yes, Lauren?
B.
B for the guy's part was the filament. Any others, guys and gals? Nay. Okay. Here we go. I think we are on the other side now, so listen for the brief description of the 5 steps here. The 3 steps here.
There are some parts of the flower that are neither male nor female. Sepals, for example. Sepals protect the developing flower bud. Or petals, for example. Fancy structures that help attract pollinators, which will take us to my bee story and also the steps of angiosperm, otherwise known as flowering plants, reproduction. First, let's understand a pollinator. Pollinators can include many types of organisms. Hummingbirds, butterflies, and bees are all examples. While pollen contains amino acids that some pollinators may feed on, and bees certainly do use the pollen as a food source, especially for their young, another great attracting factor for many pollinators is nectar. Nectar is a sugary, sweet substance produced by many flowering plants, and it is a great source of carbohydrates, meaning a great source of energy. As a pollinator drinks some of the sweet nectar, they tend to brush against the anthers of a flower. Remember that anthers produce pollen. Have you ever gotten a really good look at a bee? Many times you will see a yellow dust, pollen, all over their bodies. They just can't help themselves.
Okay, so that's leading us into the narration of pollination and double fertilization. So the pictures are in order, but it's your turn to briefly narrate pollination and fertilization. You must use the words pollinator, seed, ovary, ovule, zygote, double fertilization, sperm, blah, 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 blah. Cross off the words to help you keep track. All right, so what can we say so far for that first block?
Bees are pollinators.
All right, so bees, okay. Bees, does it say pollinate? Oh yeah, so bees are examples of pollinators. There's other things like butterflies and other insects. So we've used the word pollinator. Cool, underline it so you see that you use that word. There's another couple words here I think we should be able to use. You see stigma, you see pollen, pollen tube, we'll get to in a second. We see pollen. So I'm going to say pollen on their legs. And that's how we know that we are now going to be getting the pollen from the bee.
The idea is if this pollen can be brushed from a pollinator onto the sticky stigma, the flower can be what we consider pollinated. But it's not done yet. Pollination is not enough. The sperm cell must join an egg to be fertilized. And if it's just sitting there on the stigma, it hasn't gotten there yet. Just a disclaimer, we are going to simplify this amazingly complex process of fertilization in angiosperms. But understand the main function is that this process is going to help the plant develop seeds, which can then grow into new baby plants. First, you have to understand that pollen grains, well, mature ones anyway, consist of two types of cells, a tube cell and a generative cell. So basically this pollen grain, once landing on the sticky stigma, uses the tube cell to burrow down a pollen tube from the stigma through the stem.
Okay, so this part's kind of complex, but we're just going to kind of gloss over it and hit the highlights. So far, so I've got, these are our examples of pollinators. They have pollen on their legs. Then pollen is transferred to the stigma, so that's all pollination, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then they also made pollen must meet up with the ovary to fertilize it. So now I'm going to start on number 6, pollen tube germination. So they just said that the pollen has actually got two parts to it. There's this wicked cool enzyme that the pollen tube that can do, because it actually like destroys the middle of the style and it burrows a hole. Okay, it has to be able to break through, and it's like a drill. It drills down into through the style, because now we're on the female part, so it can get down to the ovary. It's not easy. It actually has to do some work to get down there. Just like sperm and eggs, the sperm has on the end of the head of it, it's got a little capsule of enzyme, and so when it hits the egg, the enzyme's going to come out, and it burrows a hole in the egg. And once one sperm does that, the egg puts up a force field, so no other sperm can do that, even no matter how many enzymes they try to put on there. So it protects the egg from like multiple fertilizations, because then you have like 15 baby daddies and too much DNA.
To the inside area of the ovary. The generative cell, which is enclosed in the tube cell, will divide to form two sperm cells. So what do these two sperm cells want to do? Well, they are actually going to target an ovule, which is inside the ovary. There can be multiple ovules inside a plant ovary, but each ovule has the potential to develop into a seed if fertilized. Now, the ovules have two major key players to mention, an egg cell and something else called two polar nuclei, which I'll get to in a second. One of the sperm cells fertilizes the egg. This forms a zygote, which is basically a fertilized egg.
Okay, I'm simplifying, so listen to me as I simplify. All right, so I just said pollen must meet the ovary. Then, the way it does that is the pollen tube drills down. So I'm really simplifying here. So the pollen tube is going to drill down the style. Then, I'm just going to go straight to the chase and say fertilizes the ovule. So that sperm thing is fertilizing the ovule. And that's pretty good for us on that pollen tube thing. Pollen tube germination. I probably actually said something for the fertilization one, but it all flows together. This is actually the fertilization though. It's a fertilized egg now, and what do we call that?
A zygote.
Right. So I'm going to say kind of the last step. After I said fertilizes the ovule, I'm going to say makes a zygote. And that's about as simple as I can kind of narrow it down to. So these are examples of pollinators. Pollen gets transferred to the stigma. Pollen must be able to meet the ovary. The way it does that is the pollen tube drills down the style, and then the pollen can fertilize the ovule, and then it's going to make a baby zygote, fertilized seed. And I'll leave that up here, so I'm just going to keep playing the video though.
The second sperm cell joins with the two polar nuclei. The function of combining with these two polar nuclei is that this will develop into the endosperm. The endosperm is full of nutrients for a developing baby plant. Now,
and so this is just a fun fact. Endosperm is actually what's feeding that baby plant as it's kind of just a seed. And so the endosperm is the plant food that's inside of the seed, and it's carried around so the seed can last for a long time.
if you are wondering, how did the egg cell develop and where did the polar nuclei come from? I highly encourage doing a little research. It's a process we need another video clip to cover. Because the fertilization process involves sperm cells joining two different things, the egg and then the polar nuclei, we call this double fertilization. Double fertilization is an important event in angiosperms. Angiosperms also have an added benefit that the surrounding ovary will ripen and develop into a fruit. Remember, not necessarily an edible fruit. They can help seeds travel far from the parent plant. You don't want baby plants to have to compete with their parent plant. For the non-edible fruits, some have the ability to stick to animal fur or be carried by wind or water. For the edible fruits, when an animal eats them, the seeds may pass through the digestive system unharmed, but in this way, they can travel a great distance from the parent plant. One thing to point out that we didn't mention in our example, many species of angiosperms are picky and they will only accept pollen from other plants and not accept pollen from their own anthers.
Remember Mendel? Remember the self-pollination of the pea plants? Maybe F1 generation, F2 generation. Mendel's plants were fine with self-pollination, but like we said yesterday, it's not incest, but you're kind of like self-pollinating. You don't get very much diversity. So that's why some plants really don't do for self-fertilization. They need those bees and pollinators to help them get other DNA so they can have that beneficial diversity of their genetics.
Basically not allowing self-pollination, which would make the travel of pollinators even more important. For crops all over the world, what would we do without our pollinators? Wind and other methods can only take you so far. Because pollinators are so important, we found a beekeeper who happily relocated our bees and took them off to a bee farm where they could happily pollinate flowers and let us barbecue at our house in peace. Well, that's it for the Amoeba Sisters, and we remind you to stay curious.
So, I like their videos because they usually have some like jokes in there. You know me, I'm a funny person, and they're funny people, so we're friends. Okay, so you guys okay on the bits there? You have everything filled in? CC, señorita? Yes. Thank you. Okay, so here's my game plan. We're gonna finish our web quest, and then the people who's almost done with the web quest. Almost done. Like on Plants on the Go, there were a couple videos you had to watch. I have to look back at the questions, but Plants on the Go had like 5 or 6 videos you had to watch. Okay, so okay, then you'll have to. The QuickTime thing. Some people's computers are not allowing that, so I've got those desktops that I know for sure will, and if I need to, I'll pull it up here for you guys as a group. Okay, so after the web quest, you're going to go to the plant stations. They are in the back. Plant stations include things like the dissection, which is going to be the flowers you're going to be pulling apart and labeling the functions. Whose job is this kind of worksheet? I've got a dichotomous key with leaves, so you've just got some practice, cool, fun things to do. But after that, I'm going to limit us, and we're going to stop on plants, and we're going to move on to animals, okay? And then we'll all come back together. So, give me 1 second. Let's get these laptops out. If you guys need to work together some to help each other expedite this process, that's cool. The people who were not here yesterday, you guys start from scratch. So I recommend expediting the process as much as you can. All right, so come see me for the
y'all look ratchet. I was discussion how do you get on the roadside with normal
A little bit.
not that much.
so please come back to your desk. Thank you. Thank you. Please come back to your desk. As indicated, last patient, last patient, and the last patient. Get started. When you guys finish your website, I'll show you about the template. Your list up. Yeah. I'll take it. If music becomes distracting, then I'm going to say no music, so please impress me.
We chose our dates in which our presentations are here on Tuesday.
Wow.
Because you weren't here, so she said
What are the days?
tomorrow and Monday.
Tomorrow we're not here.
Yeah, we are. Tomorrow's Friday.
Oh. Good job, it's dreaming.
Get started.
I feel like so crazy. Friday. So why am I out here?
Because you weren't here, so she put you the last day.
Oh my god. Is it?
It's not my name is going for sure.
Can I change the date?
really complete. No, our PowerPoint isn't due until the presentation goes. This, I know,
Call.
took us